All right, everyone, good day. Okay, so this is PHI 101. Okay, so critical thinking and logic. So we are already in the week 4. Okay, so our topic is about argument analysis. Okay, so for argument analysis, okay, so learning outcomes. At the end of this lesson, the student should be able to analyze the elements of reasoning, evaluating arguments, discuss induction and deduction, then explains the implicit premises. Okay. So the introduction. Okay. So there are some things we can know simply by observation. So you can tell whether it is raining simply by looking outside. Okay. So you can tell whether the bath water is warm by putting your hand in it. So your own experience, including the memory of things you perceived in the past. So it's your basic window to the world. So, but no matter how much you've seen and done, only a small portion of the world has passed before your window. For every fact you have observed directly, you know a great many things that you haven't observed. Okay? For example, how do you know what year you were born? Okay, obviously. Okay, so your parent tells you, okay, the date, the time, no? So you did not witness your own birth. Okay, do you believe that, students? Okay, of course, no? So you cannot witness, of course, no? So your parent will be the one to inform you that you were born in that date, time, and day. Right? So you were told about it by your parents who did experience the event. Okay, so they are the one who experienced the thing. All right. So you learn the things because of them. Okay. So and you trust what they told you. Okay. So you cannot actually argue with that because you are not in the situation. Okay, you are not in the event. So in the same way, you know that George Washington was the first president of the United States because you learn it from a history teacher or textbook. Okay, so in this case, neither the teacher nor the writer of the textbook witnessed Washington's presidency. So any more than you did. So, but they learned about it from other people who learned it from still others. So extending back in a chain to people who were alive in 1788 and kept records of events at that time. So a great deal of our knowledge comes from other people in this way because we can communicate what we experience. Human beings can merge their separate windows into one giant window. Okay? So by this means that okay, our knowledge is dependent, no, on what we have learned, no, from the other. Okay? So we learned these things through the information provided or shared by other people. Okay, so like for example in the first slide, no, and in the previous slide, that the day we were born, right? So we cannot witness or we cannot say what had happened at that time because we were not there. Okay, only our parents can testify what had happened. Our parents or of course, no, the NARS, no, if there is NARS available on that time. Okay. So we cannot actually justify or can give a concrete information about these things because we were not or we existed, but out in a sense that we are not yet complete. Complete in a sense that we have the ability to think, to reason, or to provide a statement. All right. Okay. So this is the thought of our introduction now. Okay. So much of the world lies beyond event that window. So we have knowledge that transcends the collective experience of human beings in general. So we know things about the origins of our planet, the riches of outer space, and the inner life of atoms, none of which has been directly observed by anyone. So we make judgment about right and wrong, about character, about the right of citizens, none of which is a matter of simple observation. So in such cases, we proceed by means of reasoning. When we reason, we use relationships among propositions to push our knowledge beyond the limits of what we can experience directly. Okay, so in this topic, we will begin our study of the reasoning process. All right. Okay, so yeah, so we'll proceed. All right, so elements of reasoning. Okay, so consider the proposition that given should restrict ownership of handguns. Okay, so this is considered as proposition, but this is not the argument yet. This is just a statement saying that the government should restrict ownership of handguns. Okay, so there's no premise, no, but instead this is the first premise, but there's no conclusion. Second premise not available here. So this is one side of a controversial political issue. So in this case, unlike the previous one, people tend to have strong opinions for or against the proposition. Okay, and they often argue about it. For that very reason, questions of truth and falsity may seem inappropriate here, but they are appropriate. So when people argue about gun control, they are not merely voicing personal preferences. So as if they were talking about flavors of ice cream, all right? So they are trying to show that their position is true, and they will offer reasons. An advocate of gun control might argue that government should pursue the goal of reducing crime, and that restricting ownership of handguns would reduce crime. So an opponent of gun control might argue that restricting the ownership of handguns would violate the right to self-defense. As you can see, in this statement, okay, so the intention of the government is to just minimize the crime, but the response of the gun owner, or let's say the person itself, who are how do you call that one, considered as the handler, no, of that object. So for him, that it violates the right of to self-defense. Okay, because his intention is not to just create a chaos or whatnot. His intention is to at least to protect himself, okay, from others. All right, but they have different perspective with the government. The government pursues this goal. It's because they wanted to minimize crime. Okay, but for the government, not the government, but the person itself, okay, serve as the handler of the gun. His intention is to just minimize. Oh no, to protect himself. Okay, so it is in the sense that if someone will intervene, okay, if someone will intervene, it violates his right, because for him he has a right to bring gun. Okay, because for him that is his shield to protect him from any circumstances. All right. So in this premise here, the government should restrict ownership of handguns. Actually, this is a command. All right. So this is a command, but this is still arguable. So which side is good to pursue? If the government would consider that the handler or gun handler will pursue to bring gun himself, then what is the purpose of law? But if law or the government would pursue the purpose or minimizing the guns or bringing of guns, for him, in their perspective, it minimizes crime, and this will benefit to everybody. Okay, so there are two situational, or there are two individuals, no, would benefits for this one. Okay, so if the gun handler will bring or will be allowed to bring the gun, then it only benefits himself. Okay, if a man has an authority to bring gun anywhere, that's because the purpose is just to protect himself. So the benefits there is only for himself. But the intention of the government is to um, restrict ownership of handguns. It's because for them, or the idea of the government is to at least to minimize crime. Minimizing crime is not just only benefit for one person, but it benefits to everybody. Okay, because we know the possibilities. If all of us are allowed to bring guns anywhere, then we know what would happen. All right. Okay, so let's proceed to the next. Okay, so this is the premise, conclusion, and argument. So these examples involve different types of reasoning, but they also illustrate a common pattern. So in each case, we are concerned with the evidence for the truth of some proposition. So in logic, this proposition is called a conclusion. So the evidence in support of the conclusion consists of other propositions called premises. All right? So thus, each of our examples involves the use of premises to support a conclusion. All right. So there are two arguments here. First is first case or issue here is gun control 4. So gun control 4, the first premise is restricting ownership of handguns will reduce crime. The second premise here, government should pursue the goal of reducing crime. Then the conclusion, the government should restrict ownership of handguns. All right. So this is the first premise, gun control 4. Okay? Or for controlling guns. Okay? So this is the argument first. Second argument here is gun control against. First premise here, okay, there is no second premise actually. So first premise here is restricting ownership of handguns would violate the right of self-defense. This statement is actually, without bias, no? It is actually true. Because we might think that we are safe if we have something to counter. Okay, if some instances, if ever, we can encounter with that. Like for example, okay, so we have something to fight, no? We have weapon to fight for. Okay, but yeah, this is not the concern here. All right. So conclusion: the government should not restrict ownership of handguns. As you can see, the opposite arguments, no? The first argument would agree to reduce crime or to minimize crime, not minimize but reduce rather. Okay. So second one is to government should not restrict ownership of handguns. Right? So these two arguments are actually with sense. Can be possible. Okay? But the question here, who will benefit? Or which one can benefit to the many? So that is actually the concern of the government, no? Mostly if there is a law, no, of course, no? If there's a bill, it is intended for everyone, not for one person. But yeah, anyway, so yeah. So these are the two different arguments with sense. No? They are both correct. But the intention is different. All right? For each conclusion, we have identified the premises that provide the evidence for that conclusion, and we have formulated those premises as distinct propositions. Okay? So a set of premises together with a conclusion is called an argument. Okay? So in everyday speech, this term is often used to mean a quarrel between two people. But it is also used to mean an appeal to evidence in support of a conclusion. In logic, we use the term argument in the latter sense. It means a set of propositions in which some propositions or the premises are asserted as support or evidence for another. the conclusion. Okay, so another way to put this is to say that the conclusion is inferred from the premises. So thus, an argument can also be described as an inference. All right, so and we will use those terms interchangeably. Okay, all right. So each of the examples above is an argument. So by contrast, consider the following exchange. Let's say, for example, according to John, the government ought to ban handguns. According to Mary, that's not a good idea. John, why not? I think it's a good idea. But according to Mary, well, I don't. Okay. So as you can see, their response or their conversation. So they are actually uh, arguing, no, because of two different perspectives, right? So for John, John here it seems he's neutral, okay? Because the government ought to ban handguns. He's just only telling that the government ought to ban handguns, okay? But Mary is keep on contradicting. No, that's not a good idea. According to John, why not? I think it's a good idea. Okay, but this exclaims is not just it is not a contradiction yet, but it is just a question why or why not. Okay, meaning to say John here is neutral, but Mary is starting or she started an argument. So in everyday speech, we might say that John and Mary are arguing about gun control, but neither of them is offering an argument in the logical sense. You're just expressing their views without giving reasons, right? So as you can see, there is no conclusion here yet. Both of them are just only giving their ideas or statements without providing a valid reason why it should not be or it should not or it's not a good idea that the government should ban handguns. Okay, so unless if Mary will just it's because if the government will pursue banning of handguns, it might violate, okay, it might violate the right not to self-defense, okay, unless if there is a concrete reason. Okay, so when we listen to someone speak or read a written text, we expect that there to be some relationship among the statements. So some organizing principle or structure, there are various structures, but not all of their arguments. So in a narrative, for example, there is usually no argument. Okay, instead, the author simply describes a sequence of events, and the organizing principle is the order of their occurrence. So as in the following passage from George Orwell's in 1984, as you can see, this statement, okay, as you can see, this is just only a statement, okay, just only providing an information without any argument, right? So Winston Smith, his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind, slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Mansions, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. Okay, so when you read this content or context, there is no argument at all. Okay, just only providing what is okay, what he's seen or what not, right? So he's just only providing everything or anything. Okay, this is just only a statement. Okay, a descriptive passage states a series of facts about something. So the series may be organized in various ways. But again, there is usual new argument, as in another passage from 1984. So the ministry of truth was startlingly different from any other object in science. So it was an enormous pyramidal structure of glittering white concrete, soaring up terrace after terrace, 300 meters into the air. Okay, this is just only descriptive passages. So meaning to say, he just only or the speaker in this statement is just only giving an information of what he's seen or what he saw. All right. So he's just only providing anything what he observed about the object he's looking at. Okay. So he just only visualize, or he just only giving an information about to the things that he saw. Okay, not the argument. Not, there's no reason at all why this is it or what. Okay, so there's no reason at all. There's no contradiction or whatever, or comments or additional information about the info. Okay, so indicators. Okay, so we must okay, recognizing in arguments. So we have to be mindful with indicator words. Okay, now, so to identify premises and conclusion, look for the following indicator words. So for premise indicators, okay, so these are the words. Actually, there are a lot of words that we can consider as indicator, but I just only put this a few words because this is actually commonly used, no, especially in argument. Okay, so since, okay, for premise indicators, since, because, as, for, given that, assuming that, in as much as, the reason is that, in view of the fact that, right? So conclusion indicators, of course, now the very common here is therefore, right? But there are a lot of indicators actually, but I just only put here the common words, no, for conclusion indicators. Okay, so therefore, thus, so, consequently, as a result, it follows that, hence, which means that, which means, which implies that, right? So these are the conclusion indicators. But if you can, when you read, okay, when you read an argument, you must be mindful with the terms after the period, especially to the third sentence. Okay, so you have to check what word, okay, what would be the word started to a sentence, right? So that's the indicator. Okay, so if you can see there is no indicator at all, then that's not an argument yet, but instead that is just only a passage. Okay, so it is a simple statement or a descriptive message or whatnot. Okay, so you can just identify it when you read the statement. Okay, so what distinguishes an argument from these other patterns is the effort to support a statement logically. So the author doesn't just tell us something that he takes to be true. He also presents reasons intended to convince us that is true. Okay, so this intention is usually signaled by certain verbal clues. For example, the word therefore, okay, so indicates that a statement is intended as a conclusion. The word because usually indicates the premise. There are many such indicator words and phrases in English. The more common ones are listed in the strategy box. Okay, so the previous slide. So when you encounter such words, it is a good sign that you are in the presence of an argument. And you can use the indicators to distinguish the premises from the conclusion. Okay? So, yeah. So you can now identify or recognize arguments by simply looking at those indicators that we mentioned earlier, right? So I hope you can do this when when you can encounter argument or statement. Okay. All right. So let's proceed. Okay. So a final point to keep in mind is that many of the words listed above can use to indicate an explanation rather than an argument. So in an argument, we are trying to show that some proposition, the conclusion is true. And in an explanation, we are trying to show why it is true. To see the difference, compare the following two statements. Okay, so there are two statements here. First, it will probably rain tomorrow because a cold front is moving in. Second statement, it rained yesterday because a cold front moved in. Okay, as you can see, the statements or the two statements, the difference. First statement, it says probably rain tomorrow. Okay, the indicator here is because. Okay, the premise indicator is because. All right, so it simplifies or it says, okay, that the possible reason why it possibly rain tomorrow. Okay, this statement or this event is not actually done because it will happen tomorrow. He guesses that it might rain tomorrow. It's because, or it probably rain tomorrow because of these indicators, or the reason cold front is moving in. So maybe this is the usual thing to happen, especially when the rain is coming. Okay, so there is a possibility, but this statement is not yet complete, or it's not yet true, or argument is not yet concluded. It's because there is no strong evidence. Okay, so this might be true, but not yet concrete. Okay, so it rained yesterday because a cold front moved in. The statement number 2 is telling the truth. But the indicator here, the premise indicator is because. But the conclusion is it rained. It rained yesterday. It probably happened. Okay? So it proves that the event is happened. It's because the word yesterday here. Right? But they have also the indicators. Okay? Because cold front moved in. Actually, these two sentences are actually connected, but the statement is different. Okay. All right. So in both cases, the word because indicates a relationship between the cold front and air and the rain. Sorry. But the relationship is not the same in both cases. So in sentence 1, we are using the presence of a cold front as evidence that it will rain. Okay. So we are offering an argument. So in a sentence 2, we already know that it rained. We don't have to offer an argument for that proposition. We know it is true because we observe the rain directly. What we are doing instead is stating the cause of the rain. We are offering an explanation. Okay, these are the difference between these two. Okay, so number 2, we proved this already. There is no further explanation, or there is no further argument. It's because this event was happened yesterday. So there is an evidence. Unlike with this one that there is an argument, it's because this can be possibly rain or not. There is still possibility. Okay? Yeah. So it is the same it is the same thing that let's say you and your girlfriend will be broke up tomorrow. Okay? Or will break up tomorrow. Okay, sentence 2, they broke their relationship yesterday. Okay, it's the same thing like that. Okay, so we can just we can just prove the situation if there is an evidence already. Okay, so the argument is actually continue. Okay, so it continues. Okay, so evaluating arguments. So a diagram is valuable tool for analysis. So it is like an X-ray picture of an argument revealing its internal structure. So once we understand the structure, the next step is to evaluate the argument. Okay, so to determine how good an argument it is, how do we measure the value? What standards shall we use? The basic standard is that an argument is good to the extent that it provides evidence for the truth of its conclusion. That, after all, is the goal of reasoning, to determine the truth or falsity of propositions that we are not in a position to verify directly by sense perception. Okay? Right. So to provide evidence for a conclusion, an argument must have two essential attributes. First, its premises must be true. Second, an argument is an attempt to establish the truth of a proposition by relating it to facts we already know. So we have to start from facts. False premises don't prove anything. Okay. Second, the premises must be logically related to the conclusion in such a way that if the premises are true, the conclusion is likely to be true as well. So in other words, it is not enough that the premises be true. They must also support the conclusion. So they must provide evidence that the conclusion is true. All right? So that is how we evaluate arguments. Okay? So not just only by listening the statement of both sides, but gathering evidence is also important. This will prove the gravity of an argument. If this is true or this is just only a fabrication or a product of a mind. All right? Okay. So, these two standards of evaluation are largely independent. So, on the other hand, or on the one hand, we can have premises that are true but provide no support for an unrelated conclusion. It is certainly true that dogs bark and that dogs are animals. But those propositions do not support the conclusion that cats make nice pets. On the other hand, we can have premises that are false, but that are still logically related to conclusion in such a way that if they were true, they would support the conclusion. Consider the argument. All fish breathe through gills, and whales are fish. Okay, so actually, here we can conclude in the second premise that if this is true or not. Let's say we don't know what is whales, then maybe we can believe or what, depending on the statement, right? So therefore, whales breathe through gills. Okay, so premises 2 is false, right? So premise 2 is false. So nevertheless, the conclusion follows the premise. If both premises were true, the conclusion would have to be true as well. All right, so always remember that one, students, that if the first premise will agree to the second premise, then therefore the conclusion will end up to a true or a valid argument. Right? So this is true. Okay, this is not true, rather. It's because the premise 2 is telling the false information. The first is actually correct because, yeah, of course, fish will breathe through gills, but whales doesn't, right? So the conclusion itself is actually wrong. All right, so as you can see. Now, for any given conclusion, different arguments can provide different degrees of support. So suppose, for example, the Lenny Lightfinger is accused of stealing Mary Mobile's car. Compare the following two bodies of evidence. All right, so letter A. Lenny Lightfinger was once convinced of auto theft. Therefore, he stole Mary Mobile's car. Second, or letter B. Lenny Lightfinger was seen by several witnesses entering Mary's car and driving it away. The car was later found 1 block from his home, and his fingerprints were on the steering wheel. Therefore, he stole her car. Okay, which one? Okay, students, which one is a complete argument? Letter A or letter B? All right, so okay, you can comment it. You can put you can put your answer in the comment section. Okay, so Lenny Lightfinger for letter A. Lenny Lightfinger was once convicted of auto theft. Okay, so if we just only base this statement letter A, we cannot give a correct conclusion. It's because Lenny Lightfinger here was just an hearsay. Okay, she was convicted of auto theft. Then there is a conclusion here. Therefore, he stole Mary's mobile car. It is the same way that we have a neighbor that is convicted also for auto theft. Let's say, for example, if we have a neighbor that also convicted for auto theft, then our vehicle, no, or our car was missing. So we can probably accuse that guy. our neighbor. But this is not a solid argument yet because there's no evidence. Unlike with the number letter B, Leni Lightfinger was seen by several witnesses entering Mary's car and driving it away. So the car was later found 1 block from his home, and his fingerprints were on the steering wheel. Therefore, he stole her car. The letter B here is very accurate, very complete. It's because there are witnesses who saw the event, and second, the car was later found 1 block from his home. Next is fingerprints were on the steering wheel. So therefore, he stole the car. But this is still debatable. What if? What if he just borrow your car? Or it is also confusing, no? If ever he borrows your car and then you don't have knowledge about it. Okay, so just kidding. Okay, so let's assume that the premises in both A and B are all true. Nevertheless, it is clear that the premise in A provides very little evidence for the conclusion. So it might justify a slight suspicion of Leni, but nothing more. Okay? So this is for letter A, guys. So let's assume that the premises in both A and B are all true. Okay, we will assume these two arguments that our premises are true. Nevertheless, no, it's clear that the premise A, okay, only the premise A provides very little evidence for the conclusion. So there is no enough evidence to say that this or the person or the accused actually stole the car. Okay, so yeah, so in B, however, we have solid evidence of Leni's guilt. The conclusion that he was the thief is the only conclusion that seems consistent with the premises. All right? So actually, in a short way, the letter B is correct. Okay? This is fully documented, no? Or the description is complete. Okay? So there's no things, no, that we can oppose, no, for this statement because there are a lot of evidences to prove that Leni Lightfinger is the one who stole the car. Okay, so now we proceed to induction and deduction. Okay, so deduction. So a deductive argument attempts to show that its conclusion makes implicit the information implicit in the premises so that the conclusion must be true if the premises are. A deductive argument is either valid or invalid. It is valid, then it is impossible for all of its premises to be true and its conclusion to be false. Otherwise, it is invalid if it is valid and all of its premises are true. The argument is sound. Okay, so this is the way we can construct the deduction. Okay, sound, okay, is equals to valid plus true premises. Okay, so therefore we can just we can evaluate or we can say that the argument is true or the argument is valid, okay, if the premises are true. Okay, so if the premises are true, then therefore the conclusion must be true as well. There is no contradiction. All right, so for first premise is true and then second premise is false, then automatic the conclusion must be false as well. Okay, do you get it, guys? So I hope it's clear. Okay, so for induction, so an inductive argument attempts to show that the conclusion is supported by the premises, even though the conclusion amplifies. It goes beyond what the premises state. So inductive arguments have degrees of strength, and a given argument can be strengthened or weakened through additional evidence. So if the argument is strong and all of its premises are true, it is cogent. Okay, so induction, cogent is equals to strong plus true premises. Right? Okay, hope it's clear. So, okay, next is Implicit premises. Actually, we know we are in our previous lesson, we discussed already induction and deduction. Okay. So this is just only a review for this topic. Okay, so implicit premises, people rarely express in all words all the premises they are using in our argument. So most argument contain some premises that are assumed but not stated. We refer to this as implicit premises to distinguish them from the explicit premises that are actually stated. So suppose we are planning a hiking trip, and I tell you that Sally can't come because she has a broken leg. My argument clearly assumes that people with broken legs can't go hiking. Do you get the point, guys? Okay. But I didn't state that the premise because it was too obvious. Okay. So there is no indicator word, no, because. It's because it is obvious, right? So if her legs, okay, are broken, so meaning to say, he can't go to what? Hiking or hiking trip, right? So everyday speech would be horribly stilted and tedious of we stated all our premises explicitly. So it makes sense to state only the new, substantive, controversial premises of an argument. Okay? So actually, there are also arguments that do not have indicators, but these arguments are clear in a sense that the statement is providing some sort of ideas or sort of information about the event. Okay, so it needs indicators if there is something they need to reason out or to provide an explanation about the event. But if it is provided already in the statement, then sometimes, okay, the indicators are not if you or you cannot see the indicator in the statement. Okay, sometimes it is substantive and controversial premise that goes unspoken, making an argument seem more plausible than it really is. Suppose I argue that since bungee jumping is dangerous, there ought to be a law against it. This argument relies on the implicit premise that the government should ban things that are dangerous. This is not an assumption that everyone would accept. It relies on a particular view about the proper role of government and really should be supported logically before one uses it to derive a further conclusion. Okay? So, identify implicit premises is a means to the goal of analyzing an argument. So the point of argument analysis is to understand what the premises of an argument are and how they relate to the conclusion. In the case of implicit premises, however, we also need to consider what assumption would be necessary for the argument to provide good support for the conclusion. Okay, so identifying implicit premises is also a means. Therefore, to the goal of evaluating an argument, in light of these goals, there are two basic rules we should follow. First, the premise we supply should narrow the logical gap between the stated premise and the conclusion. Second, the premise we supply should not commit as to more than is necessary. Right? So remember these two rules, okay? We should follow. Okay? So this is for implicit premises. Okay? So yeah. So I think this is the last slide of this topic. So if you have questions or clarification, please leave a message in the comment section. Okay? Or you can just directly message me in WhatsApp or there in my post in Google Classroom. Okay? So I hope you learned something and thank you for your time. Have a nice day, everyone. God bless.